こんにちは、皆さん。こちら、相変わらず、ワトソンですけれども、今回のポッドキャストは、相変わらず、ヘブゲンさんを紹介しますんで、どうぞ。
Ja, krass. Hey Leute, vielen Dank, dass ich wieder dabei sein darf. Heute sprechen wir mal in unseren Landessprachen. Wir werden vermutlich hauptsächlich über die Emirate sprechen heute im Mittleren Osten. Und naja, ich hoffe, ihr versteht's gut, aber wenn nicht, was kann man machen? Alles klar.
Marvelous. So, there's absolutely zero
Oh,
reason for us to do that.
Sorry, I can't speak in
You
English.
can't speak English anymore.
No,
What's going on?
I was completely surprised. We appear to be dubbed again. That's good.
There we go.
We're back in
It
English.
would be interesting to see, what happens on the YouTube automatic subtitle thing there. But anyway, we shall see what's happening. So today we are going to be talking in this podcast about oil and specifically about how the United Arab Emirates decided to leave OPEC. This is huge news. Again, it's one of those things that I guess if you don't follow this kind of stuff all the time, you're like, well, I mean, it sounds serious, but I don't know why. But mainly the thing is that OPEC's been around for quite some time now, and the whole idea of OPEC is to try to rein in volatility of oil prices, and in order to do that, all the members of OPEC who produce oil. There is another group called OPEC Plus, but just keep it to OPEC now. So there's all the members of OPEC. The leader, which is essentially Saudi Arabia, says, "Okay, everyone, we want the oil price to go down. So let's produce more oil." Or they'll say, "We want the oil price to go up, so we're going to produce less oil." So you can produce this amount, you can produce this amount, etc., etc. Now, I mean, they've used this, they kind of weaponized this in the past as well. So, for instance, when they pretty much wanted to put US shale producers out of business or make it really hard for them to do it. So they got everyone in OPEC to produce loads of oil. This meant that there was a lot of supply, which pushed the price down. And for shale oil production, it costs a lot more to get, to extract. So shale oil producers run at a loss if the oil price goes below a certain level, whereas traditional producers like Saudi Arabia, etc., it doesn't cost them very much to get it out of the ground, and so they can still make profit with a lower oil price. Anyway, they have weaponized it in the past, and actually, interestingly, I think it was Biden, in the last year or so of his tenure, he asked the Saudis, please can you produce more oil to make petrol cheaper here so that I can win the election? To which they said no. and so they've used it. They've used this in the sort of weaponized it in the past. The United Arab Emirates have they've not really liked this because they want to make money. They don't like being dictated to by Saudi Arabia of how much they're allowed to produce. So this kind of thing, this move was probably coming. And from their point of view, this is an excellent opportunity to cut ties, because if they'd have done this under normal circumstances, there would have been a big effect on the oil price. But because now, everyone's sort of distracted by the war, then they can do this, make a break, and they have shown that their allegiances are more towards going to more towards the US and Israel. So big things for big impact on oil, but also big impact in the whole Middle Eastern region. So what do you think about that, Ralph? What's your sort of take on it all?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it is massive news, but when I heard it, I basically almost fell off my chair, because it is an incisive step here for UAE to take.
And you're of a nervous disposition, so it doesn't take much to get you to fall off your chair, but yeah.
No, somebody talking Japanese at me, for example, almost did it just like 2 minutes ago. I don't know what was
yeah.
wrong with the dubbing. Kann ich
Yeah.
echt nicht verstehen. Oh, das ist schon wieder komisch, aber it was
Oh God, here we
weird.
go.
That was really weird. Heute wird's komisch. Heute spreche ich mal in 2 languages at the same time. Das ist natürlich
Yeah.
auch mal schön, although it almost never happens.
Yeah.
Right, now I'm confused.
No, hold on there.
Schizophrenic brain.
Yeah.
What was I talking about? UAE.
You're distracting yourself now.
Yeah,
So
I know.
yeah, we'll just
UAE or something. I
yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
know very little about this. Anyway,
Yeah.
right. What?
So, but just
So
basically,
it is a seismic event. It is a seismic shock. But I was wondering, in which way is it exactly seismic? Is it actually an issue for oil prices and commensurately for the economies in the Middle East, or is it mostly a geopolitical event which will rewrite the alignments and links of the countries in the Middle East to each other, and also maybe to the wider world, in particular the USA and China are here, the 2 countries to quote. And I'm almost thinking, I mean, I can't make up my mind. I'm almost thinking it may actually be more significant from a geopolitical point of view. But let me sort of gather my thoughts a little bit, and let's first of all get on the same page as we always do. So as far as I know, OPEC stands for Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. There is actually a definite article in there. There shouldn't be, but there is. So it's not Organization of Petrol Exporting Countries, but there we are. It was founded, I believe, in 1960, and the founding members I have written down on a piece of paper, so we'll get this right. This was Iran, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Iraq, and those were the ones. Then later, almost like 2 years later or so, several others joined the newly formed organization. I think it was Libya, and then several years later, the UAE. So the UAE was basically in the club more or less right from the beginning. And they have now left. It was always a Saudi Arabia, as you said, dominated club. A few numbers here. The OPEC in total generates 31% of world capacity in oil production. Within that, UAE generates 13%, so it is the 3rd largest provider within OPEC. The largest is, of course, Saudi Arabia, generating 37% of OPEC's capacity. So it really is the gorilla in the room. It's not just the largest, it's the largest by a margin. The second one is Iraq, and that's only 15%, so that's already halved. So we can get a feel of who's calling the shots here. And this is clearly Saudi Arabia. Now that UAE has left, 13% of capacity within OPEC has left, but I don't think that's the significant point. The significant point is in terms of oil prices. Well, we'll have to see, but the Iran war has, of course, thrown a spanner in the works. What UAE is trying to do, and allow me to contrast maybe UAE against Saudi Arabia, that makes some sense. I think before we get to what I was hoping to talk about a little bit, let's just also take stock of what these 2 countries are like. I think Saudi Arabia can be characterized as still being more insular looking, or more looking towards its position within the Middle East, whereas UAE is a country which has long time ago, for several years now, 10 years at least, started to look beyond the confines of the Middle East and was starting to integrate its economy into the international trading system. And now they are very well established there. They also have an economy which is more diversified than the Saudis. I think UAE derives something like 25% of its GDP from non-mineral extraction. industries, whereas Saudi Arabia, even after 20, 30 years of attempting to diversify, are still at something like 45%, let's call it 50%. That means that for Saudi Arabia, it is a lot more important, of course, to produce the oil in terms of a necessity to not only support its GDP, but also balance its budget. That's an interesting point, which is not that often highlighted, I believe. I believe the numbers are Saudi Arabia needs an oil price of $90 a barrel to achieve fiscal neutrality, meaning to budget its books. The UAE only needs $50. So in other words, to some extent, a price colluded level, I mean, this is probably not a kind word, a cooperated oil price.
You mean fixed?
Yeah, fixed, exactly. Oil price in the region of $90, which is sort of what Saudi Arabia would have to be attempting or targeting, will be good for the for UAE, because clearly it is operating at a level above the one which is required to achieve fiscal neutrality. But at the same time, anything which limits its production quota will accentuate or amplify the opportunity cost which UAE has. And this is, of course, the important thing to understand. This is not in its founding speech a cartel, but it is, of course, a cartel. And as such, there are guidelines. In fact, it dictates to others how much the capacity, quotas of capacity, of production capacity per year. Since Saudi Arabia is the most important member of the club, it basically calls the shots here, and it will have most influence in determining what these quotas are. UAE has recently increased its technology, its technological capacity to increase its production to 5 million barrels a day. Its quota is something in the region of 3.8 million a day. So in other words, it is forced by the agreements within OPEC to produce much less oil than it otherwise could. And this has been a point of difference, let's say, between UAE and Saudi Arabia for a long time. It is in fact UAE's strategy to further accelerate the diversification of its economy. And in order to do that, it is basically thinking, well, let's get the oil out of the ground. It is a finite resource. The world is moving towards non-fossil energy sources. And we have this oil glut in the ground. Let's sell it now so that we can then it's gone, and then we can use the money in order to move on to pursue our other projects. And here again it is. If we're selling it now, then we will get a proportionately higher benefit from it than Saudi Arabia, because we only need $50 a barrel to balance the books. So from that point of view, the UAE is probably more than anybody else in the club and an economy that perceives itself to be limited by the quotas to which it needs to agree. And now we get the situation where we have the Iran war. And as you said, this is almost a perfect excuse or it creates a very well-timed opportunity for UAE to leave the club, something which they probably would have wanted to do for a reasonable number of years now. And here, at this stage, it is perhaps important or insightful to observe the other side of this, which is the geopolitical avenue. UAE, by dint of being more outward-looking, more international than the Saudi Arabian country, society, and economy, also has felt increasingly the presence of Iran within OPEC to be a political hindrance to the projects which it wishes to achieve. It therefore has aligned more with Israel over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And since the start of the war is now in a camp of countries which is very much interested in continuing the military pressure on Iran in order to finish this war with a military obvious victory. Saudi Arabia is pretty much on the other side of this, of this strategic articulation. They are much more interested in achieving peace within the Middle East, in going back to the status quo ante, the one which we had before, and it is interested in achieving this through its committed ally Pakistan and China, importantly. So I think what we're seeing here is a breakup, also, or maybe we should say, is a manifestation of political alignments which have been going on for quite a number of years in the Middle East. The Iran war, one of its political consequences, has brought this to brought this out in a way that it is now splitting. And of course, no prizes for guessing, it might be that other countries are also going to follow. And this may well be the end of OPEC. But I think the most important the most important discontinuation in the cohesion which OPEC once had has already happened. We don't really need to see the smaller members leave for OPEC to be much less influential now in setting of price targets. So in the end, I would say...
I was just going to add another very important factor that will have frustrated UAE is the fact that they got way more bombed in the campaign than everywhere else. I mean, there's a really interesting chart in the FT, and it's like this. We've got this graph and this huge number of missiles that have been fired at UAE, and then everyone else is way less. And the thing is, obviously, in the UAE, they're very keen to sort of, they're pushing to diversify the revenues and encourage tourism and all that. And obviously, Iran knows that by bombing them all the time, it doesn't matter how good their defense system is. The fact that they're bombing them all the time is not going to do anything for their reputation in tourism and for business.
Exactly.
So, and they know that. So I think this is. I would imagine that's probably the thing that the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were. But yeah, sorry.
That's exactly right, and you are correct. Because on top of other things, UAE has also emerged as a tourist hub, a travel hub. Dubai is, I think, now the most busy airport in the world, even ahead of Heathrow.
Yeah,
and which is, of course, I mean, right now it isn't, I understand, but it used to be.
Yeah.
And of course, this is, as you say, there's a reputational loss as a tourist destination. In fact, we've been talking about the diversification of the economies there a little bit. The non-mineral extraction sectors of the UAE economy are in fact tourism and then some other things, and of course financial services, etc. More so than in Saudi Arabia. For no, this is clearly obvious because Saudi Arabia is still much more a theocracy than, well, it's much more of a theocracy. UAE, of course, is not anywhere near that. Apologies. Oh dear.
Have you caught my cough? I mean, I tried my best not to breathe on the microphone too much, but I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to. Yeah.
It's probably the Iranian security people trying to interfere with the call.
Yeah.
And so, in the end, what is going to happen to oil prices? My goodness, what is going on here? I tell you, we shouldn't have spoken in foreign languages.
I've got the window open over there. Maybe there's something that's coming. I don't know. But anyway, carry on.
Well, the thing is this. I mean, you see, the UAE is clearly chomping at the bit to sell the oil which is in the ground. And if or when the Strait of Hormuz is being reopened, then that is what they would want to do. Unfortunately, they saw they will be able to do this only to a limited extent because they're bound and held back by the quotas dictated by the OPEC rules. Now, these quotas are no longer important for them. As I said before, they have the technology to up their production levels from currently 4 to 5 million barrels a day. When the strait reopens, then they will just ship all this out and make as much money now as possible in order to focus on their non-mineral extraction projects in the economy. If that therefore were to happen, you would think that the oil price would come down, but to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know whether that would be a measurable impact. When the Strait of Hormuz reopens, the oil price will of course come crashing down anyway. And within that downward move, I would hesitate to see whether I could analyze how much of that downward move is accelerated by the incremental bit of oil which comes to the market because the UAE is no longer bound by OPEC regulations. Nevertheless, the sort of decrease, a sharp decrease and a lasting decrease of the oil price is, I think, in our future. This will certainly accelerate this, although in the end I would still believe that the oil price is going to be higher for longer, irrespective of this move, because a lot of infrastructure has been damaged and has to be rebuilt. So medium term, I think that's going to be the future which we see. But this is a very interesting move, which is possibly going to be net beneficial to the world in terms of the impact on the oil price, which it is going to have.
I mean, I think, it's quite amazing. Sort of stepping back from this minute, I really feel that the last 6 years in particular have seen so many, and I hate using this word, unprecedented, moves. Because remember, I think there was a year where there must have been that the use of the word unprecedented.
Yes, that's right.
Was just shot through the roof. I'm bringing it back because I just, there's so many huge events. The pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and then that had a huge impact on all the supply chains and things. We had, well, I mean, this isn't so unusual, but the harvests and stuff were really bad over sort of last year and a bit. And now we've got this, well, not only do we have the Strait of Hormuz, but just before that, Americans invaded Venezuela as well. I mean, it's just this. So many very, very, very unusual, hugely impactful things happening to the world, and you kind of feel that the world was just starting to recover. It was just turning the corner. Harvest is getting better. You've got, consumer confidence starting to come back. The companies that have survived the last few years, they're starting to, be cautiously positive. You've got the central banks cutting the interest rate. It's all looking good. And then this happens. And, it could be that we're in for it, for another couple of difficult years, or one or couple
Yes.
of difficult years, and it's a tremendous shame, for
Yeah.
a lot of people and businesses, that have survived for so long, and they're thinking, right, at last we can do
I don't
something, and
know.
then
I would read that slightly different,
yeah,
I have to say. I mean, if you turn the clock back before the events which you listed, we also have Brexit, of course, which
mm,
is the start of the string of crises which we have gone
yeah,
through. Now, let's not forget that we have Donald Trump as United States president, and he is not a calming influence on markets or anything else.
mm,
The tariffs and the US blackmailing economic policy is not to the benefit of anybody.
mm,
So when you said finally we were looking that there was relief, yes, you are right. In a sense, that's true, but it's not generally true. Tariffs
mm. I
were
mean, yes, I'm
creating a
sorry,
huge pressure on
yeah, that,
economic economies.
yeah,
In addition, the need to rearm, unfortunately, put more money into defense
mm,
to meet the Russian threat is putting more strain on European economies.
mm,
So you're still correct, but it is in the wider framework was not necessarily rosy, and yet
mm,
the stock markets have not shrugged it off. The stock markets have consistently been very strong, but I think that's all driven by tech, and it is not
mm.
necessarily so that it is by the
Although,
non-tech sectors.
very interesting. I mean, that we're right in the middle of results season, and it's the American corporates have been, they basically, I mean, the banks have all
Right.
done well, right? The banks have all been doing well, higher interest rates for longer, and trading, anyone that has trading has done really well,
Yeah.
basically.
Mm.
But it's not just them; it's other companies that have been, they've had a pretty strong first quarter set of
It's
results.
true.
And so that's what. But the funny thing is, though, you're absolutely right in the sense that I didn't mention the tariffs and stuff but the thing is, it's kind of the thing is, so many ridiculously big events have happened that's almost like, oh yeah, well. That sort of happened last year. We through. I mean, there's a bit of a shock initially, but then we were just getting through it. It just goes to show, though, how dramatic these events have been, and and here we are, and we're basically, no one knows what's happening, really. And the main conclusion is, it all depends, because I keep getting asked this, what's the impact going to be, and say, well, it all depends. How long does it go on for, and then what does the end look like?
Yeah.
Because if it was, like you were saying in the previous podcast, that if you end up with Iran basically charging tolls for everyone going through the Strait of Hormuz, that's not going to be ideal.
That can't
And
happen.
there's so much of this. Yes, I mean there's so much that could happen that we don't, and we have no idea what is going to happen and what isn't, and how long this is going to go on for, and whether even Trump just goes, you know what, actually too much hassle. I'm getting to the midterms. Let's just pull out.
Yeah,
And
but
then
it's
just let
not
everyone else
working,
sort
is
it
it?
out.
No.
No.
He's trying to do that. He's
Yeah.
trying to do just that. Professor Michael Clark said presciently, a week into the conflict, that Trump is going to declare victory and walk away. And 3 or 4 weeks after he said that, that is exactly what Trump wants to do. Because you are correct, of course. His advisors are going to tell him, mate, your approval ratings, have you seen them? And then they are going to explain
Fake
to
news.
him that down isn't good. And then he will understand that, perhaps. And it is clear to me that he is being taught that it is not a good thing to go into the midterms with these type of approval ratings. So Trump is looking for an off-ramp. Also, the war isn't going as well as he thought. I mean, America is coming out of this with egg on their faces, which is astounding because militarily, I understand from those who know something about this, militarily, they conducted themselves impeccably. But politically, it is just not going to be, it's not a sustainable activity there. And Iran, from that point of view, have basically done exactly what they have always said they were going to do. But there's one thing which I'm leading up to this. There's one thing which I think we already know. And that is that Iran has now proof of concept. This I want to allow people to sink in. It's been the case for apparently decades that geopolitical advisors and military strategists who play war games all the time have always known that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be the bottleneck in a Middle Eastern war and that Iran is going to try and weaponize it. And they've always known that Iran has theoretically the capacity to do it. But now we know that they can do it, and they know that they can do it. So it is a different thing to say we could theoretically do it and we're well positioned to do it if something happens, and saying we have shown that we can do it, and we have proof that it will hold America over the barrel. So Iran has already now emerged stronger from this conflict than they were before. That in itself is going to accelerate the Trump administration's intention to find an off-ramp to extricate themselves from this war. But they have to kind of do this in some way. And Iran doesn't appear to have any particular interest in doing it. So this is why this is getting quite embarrassing for America, to the point that the German chancellor has said that America looks humiliating for America. This is a significant statement. This is a chancellor of a major economy in the world saying something which cannot be interpreted in any other way as being confrontational. And this is where we are. And of course, the US administration understands this.
Well, and then they coincidentally withdrew 5,000 troops from Germany.
Well, this is another interesting point, because
how do you like them apples? Is probably what Trump was trying to say there.
The Trump administration has been trying to do that for a long time as well. At the end of Trump 01, if you remember, basically Trump was piping to the world that is what he wants to do. And it is possible that he heard what Merz said and basically said, oh, well, now I'm going to call off my troops. This is not good, though, of course, because it weakens NATO, it emboldens Putin. Putin's economy is further emboldened by the fact that the oil price is so high, etc. So this is creating pressure points everywhere. But back to UAE, the UAE move there, I think, accelerates a movement towards dissolution in the Middle Eastern countries, which we have been seeing for a while. And it's the Iran war which basically brought this on, which is another unintended consequence, albeit the fact that the UAE left is hailed by America as a win, because clearly the Trump administration has always been interested in it would have been happier without OPEC because of the coordination of the oil price and the artificial support of it, which is understandable.
No. So I mean, this isn't the last time I'm going to talk about it. But yeah, there we are. I think very dramatic. Developments this week. We'll keep on top of it, and the impact, etc. And for those of you, just out of interest, for those of you who are thinking, you've probably forgotten now, but why did they start off by talking in different languages? Is because I said to Ralph in the call that we had before this that I'm going. So I live in Guildford, and I am going tonight to go to watch a film in Japanese with English subtitles in Guildford. Now, I never thought I would see the day in the UK that I would see a Japanese film in Japanese, and so not dubbed, and subtitled with English. And so I thought I have to go and see it. So for those of you who are even vaguely interested, it's called Exit 8, and apparently it's like a horror film. And I do think I'm not normally a fan of horror films, but Japanese are brilliant at doing very creepy horror films. So then that's why Ralph said, why don't you introduce the Japanese? And so I dusted off my rusty Japanese, and Ralph thought he'd throw in a bit of German as well. So there you go. It's a multilingual, multi-interesting podcast. So yeah,
multifaceted, polyglot,
yeah,
interdisciplinary,
nice
thing.
Yeah. So we're so good at language. Anyway, so I think we'll just leave it there. Let's see what happens over the next week. But thank you very much indeed, as always, Ralph, for your insight and expertise. And thank you for everyone for listening or watching, however you're consuming this, by osmosis, perhaps, I don't know. And thank you very much.
Ja, von mir auch. Vielen Dank, Leute. Schön, dass ich dabei sein durfte, und tschüss.
Yeah, nice. All right. See you then. Bye.